TMZ broke the news that Jimmy Uso was busted in Florida and charged with DUI after cops observed him, quote, driving erratically and swerving all over the road. They said he reeked of alcohol and refused a breathalyzer on the scene. He was released from jail after posting a $1,000 bond and has a court date set for August 15th. That was not from this week, by the way. What I just read to you was from Sound Off 610, back on July 28th, 2019. That arrest was days after John Cena cracked a joke on Raw in a segment with both Usos about how they look like their mugshots, because both of them had spent time behind bars multiple times. Jey Uso even gave a shout-out to the Hillsborough County Police Department. What a knee slapper. A couple of comedians. How about we take it back to Sound Off 586 from February 17th of that same year. Per TMZ, Jimmy Uso was arrested this week after a drunken confrontation with cops in Detroit. Uso and his wife Naomi were pulled over near downtown Detroit after the cops allege Naomi was driving the wrong way down a one-way street. Cops say their SUV reeked of booze, so they ordered Naomi to get out of the car. While she was talking to the cops, Jimmy decided to get out of the car, took his shirt off, and squared up like he wanted to fight. And one of the cops then took out a taser, because I guess they feared for their life. And then Jimmy settled down, and he was arrested for disorderly conduct and obstruction and taken to jail where he posted bond and was released. Let's go back even further to Sound Off 265 on March 17th, 2013, where I had this news to report. SmackDown wrestler Jimmy Uso was arrested Wednesday at 12:47 p.m. in Hillsborough County, Florida, and charged with driving under the influence. He did not stay in jail for long, as he was released on $500 cash bond later that day. There's still some fuel left in the DeLorean. One more time. Let's go back to Sound Off 181. Boy, we're really going old school now. From October 1st, 2011, WWE wrestler Jimmy Uso was arrested for driving under the influence early Thursday, according to Tampa police. Uso was pulled over at 3:14 a.m. on the corner of Howard Avenue and Platt Street. Police say an officer observed the defendant traveling the wrong way on Howard Avenue in a silver Mustang. And according to the arrest report, his blood alcohol level was .180, more than double the legal limit. Fast forward to the present day. TMZ again reports that on Monday night, Jimmy Uso was pulled over at around 10:35 p.m. in Pensacola after cops say he ran a red light after being clocked going 50 in a 35-mile-an-hour zone. Officers say during subsequent questioning they smelled booze on the 35-year-old, so they asked him to exit his Dodge Charger. Cops say when he got out of his vehicle, he was noticeably swaying and claimed that Uso told them he had consumed multiple beers before getting behind the wheel. Officers say Uso went on to bomb field sobriety tests, so they arrested him. And in the police documents, cops claim that Uso's blood alcohol level came back at .202 and .205. Well above Florida's legal limit of .08. And according to jail records, Uso was booked on a misdemeanor DUI charge, and he was also hit with citations for speeding and running a red light. Hurricanes aren't the only danger that Florida residents should be worried about, based on all of these stories. You know what the scary part is? The scary part is these are the times that we know about. What about the ones that we don't? Where he was lucky enough not to get pulled over. The message here with all of these arrests, and the one Naomi was present for, just in the interest of clarity, that was not a DUI. Nor was Naomi accused of anything. She was just driving. I think she legitimately got lost and was going the wrong way. But taken together, they all tell the same story, which is that Jimmy Uso has a problem with alcohol. This makes twice in the last 2 years that he's been hit with a DUI charge. The last one was dropped when a jury found him not guilty, despite there being video evidence of him swerving and stumbling around. Now, juries don't have to explain their verdict, but out of morbid curiosity, I would have loved to know how they reached that decision. There may have been a perfectly good explanation for it. Or maybe he got off on a technicality. We'll never know. But that's not even the point. There is a pattern here. A very disturbing pattern that reminds me a lot of the Matt Hardy stuff from about a decade back. And I know many people who listen to, the Sound Off and have listened to the podcasts going all the way back to then. You know exactly what I'm talking about, because it was almost like a weekly occurrence where I was unfortunately, talking about Matt Hardy. It felt like every other week there was a new Matt Hardy story. DUI, DWI. His brother has had even more issues over the years, with alcohol. Matt was in a bad place in his life back then, but he was also putting other people at risk by his stupid actions. And thankfully, he got himself clean. To the extent that when you are addicted to something, you're never really, not addicted. But what he's been able to do, by all accounts, since then, is put those problems behind him. And I'm hoping that Jimmy Uso can do the same. It's not that I don't have empathy, or that I don't understand what addiction is. I do have empathy. I do understand that alcoholism is a disease that can ruin people's lives and can lead them to make, irresponsible, dangerous, dumb decisions. There are people listening to this right now who either are going through it themselves or know somebody who has. Unfortunately, that applies to a lot of people. But we're talking about a pattern of behavior that dates back at least 10 years. Again, that we know of. It could be longer. But 2011 was his first arrest. It's now 2021. And at what point do you say enough is enough? At what point do you take the keys away from the man and say you're no longer allowed to get behind the wheel and operate this 2-ton vehicle until you admit that you have a problem? And you make a real attempt to address that problem. Because Jimmy Uso isn't just putting himself at risk, he's putting other people at risk who share the road with him. Or who cross the street at the wrong moment. And my God, when I tweeted about this yesterday, there were so many people tweeting at me, making all kinds of excuses for this guy. I hope I never share the road with any of these people. Holy shit. It would be like playing Grand Theft Auto. And it comes at a time, and this is hardly the most important thing, but it comes at a time when this man is getting the biggest push of his life on television. He is a featured performer in main events. He's on television every week with Roman Reigns, the biggest star in the business right now. He's coming off a devastating knee injury that kept him on the sidelines for over a year. Just itching to get back. And he does. And now he's in jeopardy of pissing it all away. Now, as of Wednesday afternoon, WWE has been silent on this. We haven't even gotten the obligatory Jonathan Fatu is responsible for his own action statement that we get for everybody else, and we've gotten for him in the past. Going back to the first arrest. They could probably just do cut and paste. But they can't stay silent for much longer. They need to step in and they need to do something. And no, I don't think they're going to fire him. But I don't think they can just ignore it and pretend that it didn't happen either. Taking him off television for a while, that's very possible, even though it screws up the best story they have going right now on TV. He does a disservice not just to the company, but to his own brother because of this. Which is the risk that you run when you're in a tag team. One member of the team gets hurt, or one member of the team gets in trouble. That affects both members. This case is unique because they're actually brothers. I mean, look, we all make mistakes. Nobody is perfect. One time is a mistake. By the time you get to the second, third, fourth arrest, I hope Jimmy can admit that he has a problem and that he takes the steps necessary to address it. I have empathy. I do. I've got loads of empathy. But with all that empathy out of the way, revoke the man's fucking license and get him off the road before he kills someone. This man was nearly 3 times over the legal limit. 3 times! When is enough enough? Do we wait until he kills a pedestrian who's crossing at the crosswalk? In the past, he was swerving and swaying. I mean, do we wait until he mows down a pedestrian? Do we wait until he kills another driver? Or seriously injures another driver? I mean, if he ends up convicted, and he hasn't been yet, not on this charge. I think on the first charge he was 10 years ago. The last one he got off. He'll have to return to court for this at a later date. In the meantime, what's to say he doesn't do this again? At the very least, they have these ignition interlock devices which attach to the car, and they require the driver to breathe into the device to check their blood alcohol level, before they can start the engine. That may be an option for him if he's convicted, but I don't think he should be allowed to drive until he goes to rehab. And nobody can force him into rehab. He has to want to go. WWE might be able to mandate it under the threat of termination if he refuses. They did something similar with Umaga. Umaga had a drug problem. He refused to go to rehab. They wanted him to go to rehab. He said no. And they fired him. And his story did not end well. I don't want to see the same thing happen here. Nor do I want to see anybody lose their job. The Usos are a great team. But if WWE goes to him and says, look, you need to do this or else, and he doesn't think he has a problem, or he just refuses and doesn't want to do it, then you know what? As a company, they have to do what they have to do. It is embarrassing to them every bit as much as it is to him. It's not, Jonathan Fatu was arrested. Every time this happens, it's WWE superstar Jimmy Uso was arrested again. And that can only go on for so long before WWE just washes its hands of him and says, you know what? We got to cut ties. Enough's enough. To blow more than twice the legal limit, that's not 1 or 2 beers. That is just beyond absurd. In an age where everyone has a smartphone with multiple apps you can use to call a car to pick you up, and yes, once you start drinking, I understand your judgment is impaired. It's going to not be what it is when you're sober. I get that. Or you may think, I'm fine. I'm fine to drive. But if you're going to be drinking that much, like I said, we're not talking 1 or 2 beers here. If you're going to be drinking that much, then decide before you get sloshed. You know what? I'm going to take a car home. There's no excuse. There is no excuse to put other people's lives at risk. There should be 0 tolerance for this. And I see so many people making excuses. Stop with the excuses. Revoking his license would send a message. And again, what the specific guidelines are on that in Florida, I don't know, but revoking his license sure would send a message, especially when you're somebody who travels for a living. But I think we are past the point of simply hoping that he gets help. You can hope he gets help. I hope he gets help, but you can also take action. You don't just have to do one or the other. But for fuck's sake, get help. Because the 6th time I come on here to talk about another Jimmy Uso story on TMZ, it may not have a happy ending.